staff on the ground were critical around their expertise and their knowledge, and we had to keep them safe. And in many cases, we actually had to pull them off the job and say, you need to stand down and take a break while we brought in other staff. Fortunately, as a large national corporate, we were able to fly people in from Auckland, Wellington and other locations as well to provide backup. Other members of the leadership team were assigned immediately to set areas of action under our disaster recovery approach and were freed from all of their other daily activities and responsibilities. Crucial to the success of our program was that all these individuals were decisive but not impulsive decision makers. Obviously, we couldn't have lots of emotive decisions being taking place in the great stressful environment that we're operating in. But one of the things that we had done, and Alan's been very good at this over the years, is he has taken his leadership team, senior leadership team, and he's rotated them through the different business functions of the company, whether you're a back office support group or a front office sales group, and indeed in the senior management teams he's done that as well. So we're more than capable with enough bodies who could step into different roles and back up people who are removed from their normal day job to focus on the quake recovery. Alan's a great believer in movies, loves movies, so he's put a slide about movies in there. And his comment here is, in the words of Lieutenant General Harold G. Moore, played by Mel Gibson in the film We Were Soldiers, you should learn the job of the man above you and the man below you as well. Excuse me for saying man, but that's the quote from the movie. So, yeah, and that's Alan's philosophy around his senior management team. So he has cross-bred, cross-trained us in many facilities across divisions, so we can step in when there is an issue to be dealt with, and when someone who normally might be in charge is otherwise unavailable. But in the first quake, we had three vital learnings. The first one was command and control disciplines are hard to impose if you have been working under a different management structure to that you're now in, naturally. 2, local people absolutely resent distant commands. So by the time of the second quake, our team in Wellington had learnt that lesson, and so rather than, what happened in September is they had a whole bunch of people fly into Christchurch, set up the command centre in the Heritage Hotel, and proceed to issue commands to local staff who didn't normally work with these senior managers, and those senior managers obviously didn't have a clue how we operated in Christchurch, or even indeed critical things around the network infrastructure, the layout of the city and so forth. Big learning, those people were fantastic, very brave for coming into that operation and that environment, but wrong command structure. So we learnt that, and then the second quake, Alan changed that structure. The third thing we learnt was our network was good and it did not fail. So it had been built very well, it had been well maintained, it constantly upgraded as part of engineering standards and risk management practices. So for all the times in the past years when the network guys had asked for tens of millions of dollars for upgrade equipment, provide services in diversity, which you can go to the board and say, why do you need to spend all that money? They found out on February 22nd why you spend all that money. So we're very proud of the network. It stood up, it has never failed, and it's been a good thing for Christchurch if that's the case. This, many of you will recognise the Radio New Zealand House in Worcester Street. We have a major exchange operation on the first floor in that building, as well as taking up 2.5 other floors for staff. And it's quite sad to look at that site now. I look across the road now. I have a clear view right across to this building from my office because all the other buildings between me and that are gone now. But that's an entire city block you're sitting there looking at now, and it's actually less on that block now than there was when this photo was taken. It's pretty much the only building standing on that entire city block now, and that building is coming down as well. So it's interesting for us. That site, as I said, housed a crucial switch, one we couldn't afford to lose. Major volumes of South Island and national traffic transiting through that site. So not only would we have lost a large chunk of Christchurch communications, we would have lost a large chunk of South Island communications as well if we'd lost that site. Fortunately, we didn't lose that site, but we've just been through a 3-month process of moving something like 22,000 customer circuits out of that building across to other sites around Christchurch in readiness for that building to come down. At one stage Alan did advise, and there was media people at the event, talked about at one point we had just 45 minutes worth of fuel left in the generator of this site to keep that site going. So thankfully at the last minute, thank you to Civil Defence, they managed to get a fuel tanker through the cordons and to top up that tank. Had nothing to do with the network services, but we rely on fuel just like everybody else does, and we didn't have it, it was running out. So when the first time we told that story, the media came out with headlines like TelstraClear on the brink of disaster, entire South Island network collapsing. And as you all know, because many of you have been through the similar process with the quakes, The headline should have been quite the opposite. I mean, what this tale shows is that with a great response team of good people and strong leadership, everything is possible in the face of disaster. Someone wryly said to Alan after those petty headlines come out that what the tale also showed was that TelstraClear was the only telco to tell the truth about the effects of the earthquakes. I'm not sure if that's quite the case, but it's important for us to do so. We're not hiding anything. For without being open and honest about what really happened, you heard a couple of people refer to earlier, you don't learn from your mistakes unless you're open and honest about them. So we've learned a lot about that, and there's obviously multiple backup generators on these sites now and so forth. But we don't want to doom anyone else to repeating our mistakes around the learnings that we've had of these processes. I believe TelstraClear and many network businesses like us naturally have to have a resiliency built into their DNA because you have to. You're covering such a wide geographic area. The first step is to accept that such an event can happen, even with us, where such events happen a lot, maybe on smaller scales around your network being broken or cables and fibres being broken. People used to consider our disaster recovery plans with a degree of scepticism and amusement, and as I said, I'll put up my hands on that, but I'm a convert, absolutely. And second, you can build physically resiliency, and by preparation, your management resiliency as well, which we've done a lot of work around in the company. Before the quake, many of our business customers believed that our pleas to them to put in diversity services, backup circuits and so forth was nothing but a bit of a way for us to extract more revenue out of them. Not anymore. Obviously, a lot of those customers have now gladly got backup services and diversity circuits in place, although we're just worried that their memory might be short-term a little bit. But no. So at TelstraClear, we always believed we had the strength in our network design, especially when it came to resiliency, diversity and capacity. The quake proved us right, and we're very proud of the fact that we never lost the network during the quakes, nor have we in the many aftershocks since. We have learnt that business continuity plans must be based on reality, and they must take into account basic human behaviours. And it was a very interesting exercise for myself running the South Island post the February quake to see who you thought you had in strong leadership positions who didn't front, who you never had a thought would be able to be a great strong leader and take over projects and fronted up voluntarily and did a wonderful job. But we did certainly assume on the basis of planning the very worst that might happen. And that included things that we'd have no power, we'd have no communications, no food or water, and then assuming once you've got all of those things planned, you may not have any access to any of those things. Some of the worst case scenarios we went through planning probably aren't worth talking about because they were incredibly scary, including the example that we might have had the Hereford Street site up and running, food, water and everything else, but we might have been the only operation of food and water, and who knew it was going to turn up at the front door with an axe or a crowbar trying to break in and get stuff off our staff. So very interesting how far we went down around the planning. We've learnt that nothing is normal in a major disaster. We've learnt to keep leadership local whenever possible, but with clear boundaries around the decision-making rights. We've learnt not only to be conscious of the need to swap out local teams, as I said, but to manage them carefully, those elsewhere, substituting for these staff after long periods of work. And we've learnt, in times of emergency, to communicate constantly and repeat that message over and over again, both to our staff and our customers, not to those who are just directly affected by the earthquake. We've learnt what we thought was the impossible absolutely is the doable when your people step up to the mark. And we've learnt that smart people can absolutely find solutions, but sometimes only in the face of the inevitable and having no other road to go down. This was a learning for us, the two little green A and Bs on the slide there. Our two main exchange buildings in Christchurch, no more than 200 metres apart, now apart by an open path because there's no buildings in between them. But, what did we learn about this? No earthquake in Christchurch was ever going to happen, of course. We all just assumed that. We weren't thinking about it. Why worry about our history's outcome of having two core technology switches a stone's throw apart? It was an historical thing that evolved through merger and acquisition. It certainly wasn't part of the planning of the network infrastructure. But we've learnt that, and we're doing something about that. So we've learnt that preparation and training is essential, but in the face of the totally unexpected, common sense, compassion, intuition can take you a long way. And so that was then 13 months down the track, or now 18 months down the track. Where are we today? Well, the Hereford Street site, which you saw in the earlier photo, which kicked off the presentation, that is, we've reopened that, so we're committed to the CBD. We're back in the CBD live and operating now. We've got about 195 of our staff back in there currently, and we'll be back up to 230 staff in the next couple of months. We've learnt that people can't survive in these sorts of operations. So Sir Richard Myers, our call centre manager, had people operating in his front living room for a few months. It's not a sustainable environment for your staff. They need the social interaction and the support services that they get from a normal office environment, however you may be able to do that. And after enduring months and working in those outlying areas remotely from home, and in one instance from a hastily put together this call centre, but I also had things like the Salvation Army van sitting in my front driveway for 3 weeks as we had staff going out doing community services. My wife was sick to death of the couriers turning up at 4:30 in the morning and the phone calls constantly going and the swearing and cursing coming out of the front living room. But we're back in the CBD and we're back to stay and we're investing more, so we're completely refurbishing that 3-storey building in Hereford Street. We're also building, because that Worcester Street site is coming down, so we're building a new multi-million-dollar site out in Waterloo Road in Hornby to replicate that exchange site. It's not been any easy road for any of us, but we certainly hope that in demonstrating our total commitment to the city and in this way, that others will follow our lead, and from out of that, and you heard Roger talk about, you know, don't rush back into the CBD necessarily, but do it right when you come back. We're committed, we're back. We would just like a few neighbours around us at the moment because it's very empty. You know, we had a little period there, we had the corner dairy, that's gone. We had the cafe across the road, that's gone. And we had the old provincial pub on the corner as well, which you've seen that on the other TV show. Those guys, the Freemans, were going through, you know, rebuilding that, refurbishing that. We finally thought we'd just sign them up as a customer after 2.5 years of refurbishing work they'd been through. Finally thought we'd have a decent restaurant and pub right next door to work, gone. So, you know, so basically we've learnt that total commitment to the city in this way, others will follow our lead, and from out of the devastation rubble, a new city will be created, and you hope, of course, sustained. But you can never really be prepared enough for a disaster like Christchurch. Certainly that's no excuse for not trying to be prepared. So thank you very much.